Last year, this whole crazy thing happened, and I figure I should tell you about it. My friend Ethan is pretty deep into the music scene, especially the dance and electronic kind along the East Coast, mainly around New Jersey and New York. Honestly, what he and his team have pulled off over the past 2 years is pretty remarkable. Basically, they throw these events at major venues, usually the biggest clubs or party spots in whatever city they're in. Then they bring in big-name DJs, some of whom are almost famous borderline celebrities, really. I don't follow that scene too much, so I don't know all those DJs, but I've heard enough to know they get some huge acts. Jimmy and I go way back more than 20 years. I've known him practically my whole life, and he's been my best bud for most of it. Because of that close friendship, he always invites me and a few other hometown guys to his gigs for free, letting us hang out in the VIP section, schmooze with the performers. Pretty awesome, honestly. I really should tell him I appreciate that more. So, Jimmy had this big event lined up for July 4th at the Jersey Shore. It was supposedly their biggest one yet, and all of our friends were going. He asked me to come down early with him, and I didn't think twice about it. We hit the road with Ryan, another buddy, in our crew and made it about an hour and a half to the venue, arriving more than 4 hours before the doors were set to open. Ryan and I didn't have much to do while Jimmy's team was setting things up, so we decided to start drinking early free drinks that Jimmy's crew was allowed, courtesy of the venue. Ryan and I definitely took advantage of that. By the time the first DJ spun his set, we were more than a little buzzed, probably pretty wasted, honestly. It was the 4th of July weekend, so we figured our reckless partying was justified. Fast forward a couple hours and Ryan and I were completely hammered. I honestly can't remember the last time I was that drunk. Not even close. Now, we're grown men, so we handle alcohol fine. Vomiting and acting like fools weren't the problem. It was the lack of impulse control and poor decision-making, plain and simple. But still, we were having what I'd call a good time, at least in my hazy memory. As the night wound down, we reached that point where you're trying to figure out how you're getting home, who you're going home with, or maybe both. Jimmy had booked an Airbnb nearby, promising us beds, so that wasn't a concern. But what was on my mind was the girl I was about to leave with. We danced over to the bar, started talking to some pretty girls, and before long, we knew who we'd be spending the rest of the night with. Neither of us are models, about 6 feet tall, give or take, but in Jersey, most guys are on the shorter side, so being tall really gives you an advantage there. For some strange reason, height seems to be what most girls are looking for, more than looks or smarts. Don't ask me, with that whole Jersey girl mentality still puzzles me. Honestly, I probably botched their names, but I think they went by Gianna and Marissa. That's where my memory gets fuzzy. I think it was Marissa who suggested we all leave together and keep the party going somewhere else, and Ryan and I didn't argue. Gianna handed us drinks and insisted we get on her level before leaving, even though we'd already had a lot. I know girls buying guys drinks can seem a little odd, but these girls looked loaded, dressed up with that wealthy vibe. You could tell. After knocking back a couple more drinks with them, we headed toward the exit of the venue. As soon as we stepped outside, Marissa suggested we go back to her place, her beach house, right near the shore. That surprised me, honestly. I was expecting to head back to our Airbnb, but both girls insisted the beach house was nicer and closer. And honestly, she had a point. We strolled along the beach, chatting the whole time, and I found it pretty refreshing to talk about something other than nightlife or just drunk small talk. The girls seemed smart, engaged, and it felt good not to be lost in the usual party chaos. I even felt a little embarrassed about how drunk I was because I struggled to get words out properly, looked like an idiot, basically. Somewhere in that moment, I suddenly realized I felt way more drunk than I had a few minutes earlier. Like my body was melting, me legs felt flimsy, almost like cardboard. Moving my limbs, speaking, even opening my eyes became a challenge. My extremities felt numb for a second, but then that strange feeling just faded, and I went back to being drunk but functional. Soon, we reached Maris's house. That place was unbelievable. Maybe I'm exaggerating because I was so hammered, but it looked like the kind of beach house a pro athlete would live in. When we got inside, we took our shoes off and found ourselves in what I assume was the living room. The decor was crazy richly appointed but somehow minimalist. There were sculptures on pedestals, which was over the top, yet the whole room didn't look cluttered or tacky. It all kind of blended in, like it was part of the walls or something. Honestly, I wish I had the presence of mind to take a picture, because that place was unlike anything I'd seen. But I was distracted, so was Ryan, apparently, because not long after we stepped in, he and Marissa vanished somewhere deeper inside. Left alone with Gianna, she leaned in to kiss Meth. That was the last thing I remember before blacking out. Not her kissing me, but her leaning in. That's where everything cuts off for me. I don't recall feeling woozy again, drinking more, or doing anything else. There's a massive chunk of hours missing from my memory, and I can't get it back no matter how hard I try. And I know I didn't pass out because I've got texts I sent during that time proof I was still conscious, still awake. But I have zero recollection of any of it. If you're thinking I blacked out from alcohol, think again. I've blacked out a few times, and each time I remember some moments, not the night I'm talking about. Plus, Ryan experienced the exact same thing, same hours, same blackout. That's way too specific for coincidence. Next thing I remember, I wake up with the sun blazing overhead, lying in some random bushes more than an hour away from the party scene. I didn't realize it, but I didn't have my phone in my pocket. Nothing of mine was there, no wallet, no keys. Turns out, I wasn't even in my clothes. I was in someone else's, some stranger's clothes, not Ryan's either. Only thing I still had was my shoes, and even those were soaked and missing their laces. My head was pounding. Everything felt weird, like I'd just come out of anesthesia. I didn't even sit up right away. I just stared at the sky, trying to piece together what had happened. Bushes around, someone else's clothes, my missing wallet and keys. My shoes looked like I'd been in water, but I didn't smell like salt or chlorine. That blankness hit me hardest. No memory past seeing Gianna leave. That's when panic set in. I wasn't just hungover, I was genuinely scared. I had no idea how I'd ended up there. Did I get into a fight? Crashed my car? Was I drugged? I had no frame of reference for the last 10 hours. I stood up and looked around, couldn't see any landmarks. It didn't look like a beach town at all, which only made things worse. The road ahead curved into more trees. Just a few 100 feet away was a 7-Eleven, literally the only thing in sight. I sprinted straight to it, asking the guy behind the counter if I could use his phone, telling him mine was stolen. He looked at me suspiciously, probably thinking I was trying to scam him, but he slid the phone across the counter. The first number I dialed was my sister's, mostly because I still knew it by heart, along with my parents'. I really didn't want to call mom or dad, it just felt wrong. My sister picked up immediately, and I tried to explain as best as I could, but honestly, I was all over the place. She gave me Ryan's number, which I called multiple times, no answer. I started to worry that maybe Ryan was in the same boat, drugged, robbed, dumped somewhere random. I was about to call the police when, out of nowhere, Ryan walks into the same 7-Eleven. We stared at each other, no words needed, and then we just nodded, giving each other a quick fist bump. Ryan told me his side of things, and you guessed it, it was basically identical to mine. That was the proof we needed. We called the cops and thanked the 7-Eleven clerk for his help. A few minutes later, we were outside, recounting our stories to the police. To their credit, they took us seriously at first. But as we kept talking, their questions got suspicious. They started wondering if we just overindulged, wandered off, and passed out somewhere. Not outright accusing us, but you could see they didn't fully buy it. I told them it was ridiculous, we would have walked into some random town an hour away just from partying. They didn't seem happy with that. I gave them my sister's number, asking them to call her. Luckily, she was tracking my phone via Find My iPhone, and it showed my device in a parking lot a few miles away. To everyone's surprise, the cops drove us there. Sure enough, our phones were sitting right on the pavement, side by side. Having my phone back was great, but it only confirmed their theory we'd just been drunk and robbed. They started suggesting that we probably hadn't been robbed at all, just lost our wallets along with our phones. Trying to get them to see the bigger picture, I told them to check out the house Marissa claimed was hers. They weren't interested. They said we were too drunk to remember correctly, and one of the officers even said, "He's more than you think." They handed us their cards and told us to call if we remembered anything else, but they were reluctant to connect us with any other officers willing to investigate further. They just told us to find a ride home because our phones still worked, and then they left. After they drove off, I finally scrolled through my phone. Things got even weirder. I saw messages sent from stuff I'd supposedly said through the night to friends, family, and coworkers. Typical, normal stuff, thanking Jimmy, telling my parents we were safe, that we crashed at a friend's place. But if I read all of those together, they didn't make sense. They contradicted each other. I had missed calls and texts from Jimmy, so I called him, and he sounded relieved, thought we'd been hurt or worse. He told me he'd come pick us up. We canceled all our cards, but strangely none of them had been used. All we could do was try to make sense of what had happened. We knew we'd been drugged, that much was clear. But how? I didn't know of any roofies or drugs that cause that kind of total blackout while still leaving you conscious. Everything I'd read said those drugs just knock you out cold. Plus, I was still texting, still conscious. And Ryan experienced the same blackout. That's way too specific for it to be a coincidence. The last thing I remember, waking up in the bushes over an hour away with no idea how I got there. My phone was gone, along with my wallet and keys. The clothes I was wearing weren't mine, they belonged to some stranger, not Ryan. My shoes were completely soaked, missing laces. My head was pounding, disoriented as hell, like I just came out of anesthesia. I didn't sit up right away. I just stared at the sky, trying to figure out what the hell had happened. No phone, no wallet, no keys, no clues. It was like I'd just been dumped there after being drugged or kidnapped. I didn't even know what to think, and the worst part, me memory was blank. I couldn't remember anything past the moment Gianna left. That's when the panic sank in. I was scared, not just hungover, but genuinely afraid. I was in the middle of nowhere, no idea how I got there, no clue why. What if I'd been in a fight, had an accident, or worse, being drugged? I had no solid information, nothing but darkness and confusion. I got to my feet and looked around, trying to spot something familiar, but all I saw was woods and that tiny 7-Eleven across the street. It was the only sign of civilization nearby. I dashed straight to the store, asking to use the owner's phone, telling him my phone was stolen. He looked skeptical, probably thinking I was trying to scam him, but he let me use it. First call was to my sister, still remembered my number. I explained what was happening, but I wasn't really coherent. She gave me Ryan's number, which I called, repeated no answer. I started to panic, thinking maybe Ryan was in the same boat, drugged or robbed or dumped somewhere. Just as I was about to call the cops, Ryan walks into the store. We just stared at each other, then nodded. He told me his story, incredible but the same as mine. That confirmed it. We both were in deep trouble. We called the police, and the clerk from the store was helpful. A few minutes later, we were outside, telling our story again to the officers. They seemed to take it seriously at first, but as we kept talking, their skepticism grew. They questioned whether we'd simply gotten too drunk, wandered off, and blacked out. They weren't outright accusing us of lying, but seemed doubtful. I told them it was ridiculous to think we'd walk an hour away on foot from such a party. I handed them my sister's number, asking them to call her. Turns out, they looked up my phone's location, and it was in a parking lot a few miles down the road. They drove us there, and sure enough, our phones sat on the pavement. Getting my phone back was a relief, but also a sign these guys thought we had just been too drunk and robbed ourselves. They kept hinting that we probably weren't robbed at all, just lost our stuff. I insisted they check out the house Marissa claimed to live in, but they refused. They said we were too drunk to remember right and that we just lost our stuff. They handed us their cards and told us to call if we remembered anything else, but they didn't seem eager to help more. Then they left us there stranded. After they took off, I finally scrolled through my phone. And man, it got even weirder. I saw text messages I had supposedly sent during the night to friends, to my parents, even to girls I'd been talking to. All normal, casual stuff, thanking Jimmy, saying we were safe, that we'd crashed at someone's place. But when I read all those messages together, they made no sense. They contradicted each other in ways I couldn't explain. I had missed calls and texts from Jimmy, so I called him. He was relieved, thought something bad had happened to us. He told me he'd come pick us up. We canceled our credit cards just to be safe, but none of them had been used. We sat in silence, trying to piece it all together to understand how this could have happened. We knew we'd been drugged, no doubt. But the how? I don't know of any drugs that cause that total blackout while still keeping you conscious enough to send texts. And Ryan went through the same thing as meth. That can't be a coincidence. The last memory I have, waking up in the bushes, hours away, in some stranger's clothes. Someone else's clothes, not Ryan's. My shoes were waterlogged with no laces, and I was dizzy as hell. All I felt was dread, like some sick, terrible thing had happened, but I'd never get to know exactly what. It was this gnawing feeling of wrongness that stuck with me, and I absolutely can't forget what happened next. I drove all the way back to the shore trying to find that house. I kept walking along the boardwalk, convinced I'd eventually stumble onto it. And I did. We walked up to the house and rang the doorbell. An older guy answered, and I asked if a girl named Marissa lived there, if she was around. Maybe a daughter or granddaughter near our age. He shook his head no. I made up some cover story about someone lying about owning the place. He just chuckled and closed the door. I walked away with a weird, unsettling feeling deep in my gut, like something truly bad had gone down that night. I still think about it. I wonder if those girls were involved in something way bigger, kidnapping, worse, something we'll probably never find out. That's how it ended, and I have no updates after that. But if anything else happens, I promise I'll let you know.